I've seen things that shouldn't exist. Things that made my skin crawl and my heart race like I'd never felt before. And every time I tell the story, I question if I'll sleep at all that night. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, like, and comment so you never miss stories like this. Watch until the very end, because the last part will haunt you long after the video is over. I started working at the hospital's morgue, fresh out of college. I thought I was prepared. I thought I could handle the detachment required to work around death day in and day out. But the reality was far different. The first few weeks were quiet, almost uneventful. Bodies came in, paperwork was signed, drawers opened and closed, and life continued outside these cold, white walls. You learn to treat it all like a routine, but routine doesn't prepare you for the moments that make your blood freeze. One night, I was finishing up a shift. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. It was just past midnight. The hospital was empty, except for the night staff nurses, a security guard who barely spoke, and me. I was alone in the back corridor, pushing a cart of linens past the cold storage when I first noticed a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the pipes, or maybe someone dropping a tray in the distant kitchen. But it was rhythmic, a soft, deliberate tap. Tap. Tap echoing down the corridor. I froze. My hands instinctively tightened around the cart handle. "Hello," I called, my voice low, unnervingly aware of the silence around me. No response. Just the tapping. Slow, patient, almost. Human. He kept mobbing, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But every step I took, the tapping grew slightly louder, more indistinct. Not metallic, not accidental, like someone or something was following me. I reached the cold storage. Inside, rows of drawers lined the walls, each containing a patient who had passed earlier that day. I needed to check the temperature and make sure the cooling system was functioning. That's when I heard it, a whisper, just a single word. So soft I could barely catch it. "Help!" I stopped dead in my tracks, staring at the row of drawers. My mind. Russ said maybe it was a nurse practicing voice exercises, or some joke from a coworker. I checked the empty hallway, but no one was there. My heart was hammering, and I could feel the sweat trickling down my back, despite the cold. Then, I noticed one drawer, the one in the corner, was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd closed it earlier. And that's when the smell hit me. Not the usual antiseptic or the faint decay you get used to in a morgue. This was different. Sharp, sweet, almost rotten candy. I swallowed hard, telling myself I was overreacting, that my mind was just playing tricks after hours of solitude. I approached the drawer slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The tapping stopped. The whispering stopped. Only silence. Now, I flicked the light inside. Nothing. Empty. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe a body had been moved. Maybe the latch wasn't secure. Maybe it was a draft. I exhaled slowly and turned to leave. That's when the drawer slammed shut behind me. I jumped. My flashlight flickered, plunging the room into a strobe of shadows. 10 primeras a doble. It, or thought I saw it just for a moment. A figure, taller than a normal person, hunched over in the far corner. It wasn't moving like a human. It was almost gliding, and then it was gone. Who's like that? I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things, but the cold on my neck lingered long after. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Every noise, every shadow, every reflection in the polished floors made me flinch. I kept checking the drawers, making sure nothing moved. By the time the morning shift arrived, I was exhausted, trembling, and silently questioning if I was losing my mind. But it wasn't over. Weeks later, I heard similar stories from my coworkers. A nurse spoke about hearing faint crying in the ICU when she was alone. A janitor mentioned seeing a dark figure wandering the hallways past midnight. I began to realize this was not isolated. It was the building itself, or something trapped within it. Something that had attached itself to the living, lingering just beyond perception, testing us, feeding on the fear it could provoke without being seen. The most unsettling part. Some nights, I'd leave the morgue and feel watched. Not in a figurative sense, but a tangible presence. A cold brush of air on my shoulder when no one was near. Footsteps behind me in the empty hallways that matched my own pace. And when I dared to look over my shoulder, nothing. Nothing but shadows, stretching into darkness. It became a twisted game. I'd hear the tapping, the whispers, or the soft rustle of a drawer opening. I'd freeze, heart racing, unsure whether to run or investigate. And every single time, I felt it a gaze. Not a human gaze. Something older, patient, and utterly unfeeling. Watching, waiting, and every morning. No evidence remained, no explanation, no closure. Only the lingering sense that the building itself was alive in a way it shouldn't be. I'm still working there. I've become numb to some things, but the fear never leaves. It's in the echoes, in the drafts, in the silence between one heartbeat and the next. And I've learned something crucial. Some places don't want to be left alone. Some presences follow, unbidden, unrelenting, just beneath the surface of what you can see. And the worst part, even now, as I recount this, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. After that first night, I began noticing the small things. Little things that didn't make sense until you saw them happen again and again. A blood pressure cuff left on a gurney would be twisted just so, as if someone had deliberately repositioned it. Notes on charts would vanish, then reappear in places they clearly hadn't been. The air always felt colder near certain areas of the morgue. The corridors, even the ICU. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but once you noticed, it became impossible to ignore. One evening, I was assigned to transfer a body from the ER to the morgue. A man in his 50s, cause of death listed as complications from a heart attack. Nothing unusual on paper, but as I wheeled him through the long, dimly lit hallways, I started feeling that presence, again watching, judging, lingering, just at the edge of perception. The corridor lights flickered, casting shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally, crawling along the walls like smoke. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on my task, but every sound felt amplified. The squeak of the gurney wheels, the soft tap of my shoes on the linoleum, the distant hum of the ventilation system. Then I heard it. Breathing. Not the steady, mechanical sound of an oxygen mask or monitor, but slow, deliberate, heavy breathing. Behind me, I froze. My eyes darted around the hall. Nothing. Just the faint light in the long stretch of empty corridor. I told myself it was the wind through the vents. I kept moving, faster now, heart pounding, but the breathing didn't stop. It followed, not directly behind me, not in a normal pattern it echoed, bouncing from wall to wall, always slightly out of sync with reality. I reached the morgue door and fumbled with the key card, hands shaking. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to calm down. But then I realized something. The body on the gurney wasn't still, not in the way you'd expect, not alive, not moving like a living person, but something had shifted. The arm was now slightly raised, as if pointing, a gesture too deliberate to be coincidence. I froze, every nerve screaming at me to leave, but my curiosity and maybe my fear kept me rooted in place. I looked closer. The eyes, though closed, seemed to glimmer faintly in the fluorescent light, like the last trace of life was clinging stubbornly. I reached out to adjust the arm, telling myself I was imagining it, but the moment my fingers brushed the sleeve, a cold rush of air hit my face, sharp and icy, carrying with it that same sickly sweet scent. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the gurney. And then I heard it again. The whisper. Clear this time. Don't leave. He spun around. The room was empty. Silent, my flashlight flickered, leaving me half in shadow. I backed toward the drawers, my stomach twisting. My rational mind screamed it was impossible, but the fear was undeniable. A living thing that gripped me by the throat. Tinex. Wick things escalated. Objects moved on their own cloaks, spinning backward. Doors that were locked suddenly ajar. Trays of surgical instruments shifted from one counter to another. And every time I tried to rationalize it, something else happened to shatter that explanation. The whispers grew louder, almost conversational, echoing faintly through the hallways, even when no one else was around. Sometimes I thought I heard my name. Sometimes it sounded like urgent, warning murmurs I couldn't fully decipher. Then there was the night the security cameras caught something. I wasn't supposed to be monitoring them. I was just passing the office, but curiosity got the better of me. On the grainy feed, a shadow moved against the direction of a cleaning cart. It paused, lingering in the middle of the hallway, then drifted toward the morgue entrance. Not walking, not running, lighting. And as the camera flickered, it seemed to vanish. No doorway, no corner, just gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing the shadow in the hallway, the whisper in the cold, the body pointing as if it knew I would be watching. My dreams were nightmares I could barely remember upon waking. Fragments of corridors, frozen bodies, and that icy presence pressing against me from every angle. I started leaving small lights on in the morgue and in my apartment, convinced that darkness alone invited it closer. One particularly quiet night, I was alone with a body from the ICU, a young woman who had passed suddenly in her sleep. Nothing particularly unusual about the case, except for the way her eyes seemed unnervingly alert in death. I was stacking paperwork nearby when I heard the faint click of a drawer opening. I froze. My heart pounded. Slowly, I approached. Nothing. Drawer closed. Primera vez que Hawaii, telling myself I was imagining it. Yet every instinct screamed I wasn't. The air was heavy now, pressing in from all sides, carrying that same subtle, sweet rot of decay. I could feel my breath forming small clouds, even though the room was warm. And then, the whisper. Louder this time. More insistent. Look, my hands shook as I turned toward the body. The arm, which had been resting at her side, was now raised, pointing straight at me. My mind screamed, "It's impossible. This is impossible." But there it was. Not a flicker, not a trick of light. Deliberate. Directed. And in that moment, I realized, whatever was in this hospital, in this morgue, wasn't confined to a single body. It wasn't just a spirit. It was something aware, something patient, something that waited. And it knew I was watching. By the end of that shift, I was pale, trembling, and utterly convinced of one thing. I was no longer alone in the morgue. Not truly. And whatever it was beginning to learn me. My habits, my fears, and perhaps worst of all, how to make me believe I had no choice but to stay. Night after night, staring into the abyss that watched right back, I began to dread the late-night calls, the transfers, the quiet moments in the corridor. Every sound, every flicker, every shadow could be it. And with each encounter, the weight grew heavier, pressing down on me until I could feel my pulse in every nerve, my breath in every muscle. The building itself seemed alive in a way I had never experienced before. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. I was on the late shift, alone except for the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional distant beep from a monitor somewhere in the hospital. The corridors were quiet, unnervingly so, like the world had been muted and left for me to navigate alone. I kept my flashlight ready, hands trembling, every shadow a potential threat. I was checking the drawers, one by one, ensuring every body was accounted for. Most nights, this was routine. Most nights, the whispers stayed faint. But that night, the air felt heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. My skin crawled under it. The temperature dropped suddenly, sharp and biting, forming goosebumps on my arms. I stopped in front of a row of cold storage drawers and heard it again, the whisper. Clear, demanding, unmistakable. Come closer. My stomach twisted. I wanted to turn, to run, to escape, but something compelled me forward, a mix of fear and dread that made my legs move almost against my will. I reached the final drawer. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Slowly, I pulled it open. The body inside wasn't a body at all. It was the vague shape of a person, hunched and dark, featureless except for eyes that glowed faintly, reflecting the light. I froze, every muscle screaming at me to move, to escape, but my feet refused. The figure shifted its head, a deliberate, slow movement, as if studying me. And then the whispering started, multiple voices now, overlapping, echoing from every corner of the morgue. Stay. Don't leave. Watch. Follow. Each word sliced through the silence like a blade. My heart pounded violently, my breath shallow, fogging in the cold air. The gurney wheels behind me squeaked as if pushed by unseen hands. Shadows twisted across the walls, writhing, reaching toward me. I stumbled backward, flashlight swinging wildly, catching glimpses of bodies in other drawers shifting slightly, as though aware of my presence. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet I was trapped by some invisible force, tethered to the nightmare unfolding around me. The figure glided toward me, slow and deliberate. The whispering became a cacophony, voices overlapping in frantic, incomprehensible messages. I could feel the cold air pressing harder now, as though the room itself had contracted around me. My vision tunneled. I thought of running, but my feet were heavy, rooted to the spot. Then, the figure stopped mere inches from me. I could see the faint outline of its face, or what I imagined as a face. Hollow, dark, impossible to focus on. And the whispering stopped. Absolute silence. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing remained. And then it spoke. A single, chilling word that seemed to resonate in my chest rather than my ears. Alone. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of a gurney, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The beam flickered across the room, catching every shadow, every corner, every shifting shape, until it landed on the open drawer. And it was empty. The figure was gone. No trace. No sound. Just the lingering cold and the metallic scent of fear. I didn't sleep that night or any night that followed. I began taking notes, documenting every whisper, every shadow, every impossible movement. Co-workers, when I mentioned it, would nod, some pale, some nervous, but none could explain it. They had their own encounters, their own stories, and the pattern was clear. This presence wasn't confined to one body. It wasn't just a haunting. It was something older, patient, intelligent, something that had been there long before me and would remain long after. Weeks passed. I started noticing personal touches, things I would leave in the break room moved to different locations. My coat hung crookedly, even when I was sure I had straightened it. My notebook, left closed, would be found open. Pages marked with words I didn't write. It was as if it wanted me to know it was aware of everything I did. Watching, learning, waiting. And then came the night I saw it in the reflection. I was walking past the glass doors, leading to the main corridor. For a fleeting moment, I saw a figure behind me in the reflection. Tall, hunched, shadowed, with eyes that seemed to burn faintly in the dim light. Ispun, arohun, nothing. The corridor was empty, but the reflection remained etched in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I realized something terrifying. This place wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It wasn't about spirits or ghosts. It was about something feeding off fear, learning how to terrify, growing stronger with every heartbeat, every gasp, every panicked glance. And I was its audience, trapped in a building that refused to let go. Now, every night is the same. I walk the corridors, check the drawers, hear the whispers. Sometimes I feel it brush past me, colder than ice, lighter than air. yet impossible to ignore. Sometimes I hear my name, called softly, urgently, from empty corners. And every night, I remember that first tap. Tap, tap, in the silent corridor. That first whisper of help. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it lingers. All I know is that it's patient, clever, and utterly relentless. And I've learned something else. Something I wish I could unlearn. No one ever leaves these halls the same. Not completely. Part of this building stays with you. Part of this presence follows you home. Hidden in shadows, in drafts, in the quietest moments of the night. If you ever find yourself alone in a morgue, or wandering the empty halls of a hospital at night, remember this. It's watching, waiting, and it remembers. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to leave a comment with your thoughts. Hit that like button, and subscribe with the bell turned on, so you don't miss any more true horror stories that will keep you up at night. And trust me, you'll want to watch till the very end next time.